Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Heels, Episode 7. So I'm going to do this without a safety net, which is usually just like IMDb at my side. I'm going to otherwise just kind of talk about what all is going on and hopefully I get everything quasi correctly, but probably won't all perfectly happen. There'll be someone that I'll probably forget about. Uh, anyways, so pushing on, this episode was so worth the wait. There is so many amazing payoffs that happen in this episode, and you're really just seeing where it just feels like everyone is just jumping ship seemingly from the DWL promotion, and because like Jack just like doesn't seemingly have a game plan, and he's just ticking everyone off by having them all wait, or to have them just kind of like, well, is it going to be me, or is it going to be him, or is it going to be her, is it going to be who, is it going to be what? So like, but there is some really good payoffs, and there is some interesting things that happens with a lot of these characters. We end up seeing really just everyone just starting to break down, and that's what is to make this probably the best episode. We're probably to see people at their worst moments, or people just falling apart because of the whole situation that is present themselves. And that's going to be the hardest episode to shoot, film, whichever. And so eventually we'll see how episode 8 plays out. Maybe with Jack being possibly behind bars going into episode 8. We don't know. But it seems that Jack is to be juggling too many things all at once, that we get a moment in this episode where he is to have this like the camera is far away, just kind of zooming in on his car, and we have Jack with this primal like scream, of course, and we're like, yeah, like this is of course getting too much for this character. And like there's a lot of times when a lot of people want to get to that point of just utter just either frustration or things just not working out, to where yeah, like you just want to just primal scream out to the heavens because you're just so just frustrated, and to the point of you just going like, I cannot deal with this, or I can't do this anymore. Or so eventually we'll see where all of these characters are to eventually forcing themselves to head. Because a real interesting thing is to see Crystal now kind of like being like, okay, it seems like there is no job for me in wrestling, so I'm going to create one for myself. And like still, like we just have like a point where we're like, well, why can't this work out? Why can't it just be like so? Like I've rooted for like any kind of female character in this show to seemingly be like and so when we have kind of several females like kind of wanting to uh, like change what they're doing, so to speak, like I was like, yeah, like let's get this going, let's see where this goes. And we also get to see the FWL, and it's an actual real legitimate thing. Like it's a real presence. It's not just stock footage taken from some TNA Impact thing. It really exists, and like what a real amazing payoff that is, to eventually have like from pilot episode and some Charlie Gully kind of bits and pieces here and there, like we now actually get to see the payoff of this thing, and it just looks so freaking awesome that we get to this part of this big payoff that is to show us what this other promotion is. Even though we still, of course, are just like, but I'm DWL, mother trucker. But still, like, you're seeing this other promotion, and you're finally really seeing that it exists. And I'm like, good. I'm like, great. Like, this is great payoff. This is a great thing. So yeah, like, man, did I really enjoy this show. And really, if they didn't have one stitch of second with wrestling in this show whatsoever, I still would have been happy about all this. But we do, of course, get some of the DWL people training people in, kind of running the ropes and doing like the basic stuff that I've kind of seen in some other kinds of like when you go into like seeing like performance centers from WWE and all kinds of stuff. You end up seeing them kind of doing these bumps, and like they run the ropes, and then they end up doing like I ended up seeing like hip tosses and kind of I think it was like I think it was like arm wrench or arm, because like arm drags I think are different, but like normally when you go and you immediately go into like a WWE 2K game, like normally like the moves that they end up kind of doing here are kind of most of the like the common stuff that you would see like right in the beginning of a WWE game. But we also end up seeing a like I would say like a Hurricane Rana, like kind of as a uh, like from a rope kind of thing, where eventually like they swing into it. I believe is what it's called, or maybe it's called a Frankensteiner. I'm not quite sure, but I know both of those exist. So but yeah, so we end up seeing Wild Bill going into the ring and like kind of really pushing a lot of the new talent in there, and I thought that that was kind of interesting. Uh, but yeah, so I really and then we also get to see like the actual promotion of FWD, where you get to see like almost close to like death matches or hardcore matches, or like something that's really just like like in the ways of which from ECW period in time and whatever, we get to see like extreme kind of rules wrestling and stuff like that. So yeah. So with that said, let's go on to uh, going on to this episode. Let's go into that double five time territory. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this episode. So reasonably, there's a lot going on in this episode, and if I don't get everything perfectly to second scene, there might be stuff that I want to kind of feel is the most important thing first, and then eventually like I'll go on to kind of getting what I can from every bit of, because there's a lot going, there's so much going on in this episode, but I thoroughly enjoy it. The like probably hands down has got to be the best Heels episode story wise. And that's hard to say because a lot of them do have these interesting stories to them, but this just has so much to it, and it's so interesting. So starting off this episode, we have both in flashback, we have both Jack Spade and Tom Spade kind of driving off to going and eating spaghetti with some promoter. So they're going on this road trip to make it to this guy, and so eventually Tom is to ask Jack, like, hey, could we pull over? I gotta pee. And Jack is like, hey, we have an exit right here. We can probably go to a gas station and do it that way. And Tom was like, really? Like, come on. Like I can just pee off to the side of the road. Like, come on, we're men. So eventually both of them go out and whip it out and just pee off to the side of the road. And so eventually Jack and Tom eventually get into this dialogue because Jack desperately wants to try and get the DWL's company's word out there in different mediums. And Tom is just like, well, like, if anything, we've just had bad times, and like things will just kind of will turn around. And Jack is like, well, The only time that anybody is to have a video on the internet is because they ended up bringing like a cell phone of their own to these promotions. And like, come on, like, we should go and try to expand ourselves and go through different mediums to try to get some people to our place and go through the internet to do that. And so eventually Tom is getting frustrated by like Jack just kind of like going around him and planting all these seeds, and kind of like Tom is just getting frustrated because Jack is kind of like doing business without him, or basically just like almost saying, or almost Tom is to feel like that that he is to be passing the torch to Jack, and Tom doesn't like that. He's like, dude, I'm still at my prime. I'm still ready. I can still do this. And like Jack is to also mention to have Ace wrestle, and Tom is like, no. Like, he's going on to college. He's going to play football, and that's it. Like, he's not going to be wrestling. That's not going to happen. And so it just gets to the point where Tom gets so frustrated with Jack because it seems like Jack has already made these plans, and like it doesn't seem that Tom's word really much matters anymore within this company, because it seems that Jack is to already kind of say, it's like, well, hey, like, I just want to like keep intact what you have already built, and I want to just like expand upon it, so that way like eventually like you can like live the rest of your life just knowing how like even better that this company has been now, like, and you can kind of eventually just uh retire off, just realizing how much this company has just been now better. And Tom just doesn't like that. It's like, dude, I think Tom is like, dude, I'm not ready to like hand over the reins or hang up my boots. And that's what Tom is really just to have this one moment here where Tom is to really just tell Jack, it's like, well, hey, like, if you can really pin me right here and now, uh, then you can get the company. I'll sign it over and whatever to you right now. Pin me. And Jack is like, come on, like, we don't have to go and do this. Like we don't have to solve this whole thing by fighting. Which is kind of funny because we end up having Thomas, who ends up in school, Jack's son, Thomas. He ends up going and fighting and punching some kid in the face because he was kind of an a-hole. So Thomas just desperately wants to fight, and there's no like disagreeing with him about it. So Thomas starts to lock up with Jack, and because Jack is to say that he knows all of Tom's moves, and so uh, Tom, of course, is to lock up and try to figure out how to get to Jack, but everything that Jack is doing is countering, and eventually we end up having, I think, Tom trying to like spear Jack, and Jack kind of like countering that also, to where almost Jack falls over. Because, yeah, it's a freaking spear. You're tackling somebody, and you're probably going to fall over numerous times. But anyways, so eventually we get to where Tom's real just frustration is like, hey, don't come after my stuff, boy. Like, don't come at, don't think that you can take everything that's mine just yet, kind of thing. It's like, don't steal from out from under me, kind of thing. And that's Jack's real being upset, being angry, and really having that heel part of him come out, just because Jack still feels that the company is still in a good place, but Jack is just like thinking like, well, couldn't it be in a better place? Couldn't it just be uh, at a place where we like don't have to work as hard, and so on and so forth. So like that's the whole thing. That's the whole part of this intro dialogue. So pushing on. So Win, of course, having the intro scene, of course, as per usual. So Charlie Gully is to eventually decide to just kind of TP the DWL Dome with FWD promotions, like just kind of huge like things of paper just plastered all over this dome as this just kind of prank thing. And so Jack does nothing about it, but evidently Charlie is to mention that he was to go and send people back to go and clean that up. Like, it was just a joke, it was just a prank. But so Jack doesn't respond to anything about it at all. It seems like we end up having like a few wrestlers like Diego kind of looking at Apocalypse and Diego, and I think there might have been Bobby there or someone else, kind of just looking at the promotions and just kind of looking how like real professional it looked. And so Jack is just mentioning it's like, well, yeah, they look professional because they're trying to poach other wrestlers to come to their promotion. So eventually what ends up happening in this episode is we are, of course, transitioning to the state fair. And so they, because of Rooster going and leaving this promotion, they now are to go and start like auditioning certain wrestlers to eventually be part of the DWL, because Rooster's out, so they got to go and find some people. So what ends up happening is that like certain kind of random people start showing up to get auditions, and like Crystal, who is to go to Jack and apologize about what she had done to possibly create Bobby getting injured and kind of going off script and whatever. Jack is to take her apology, but like he's not all of a sudden going to offer her like, oh well, hey, I'm going to create a position for you, or oh, I'm gonna have you valet like Wild Bill or something like that. No, like it just seems like he's like, okay, thanks, and then he just walks off. So Crystal goes and auditions to just be a wrestler, and instead of just being a valet, which I'm like, yeah, like get in there with the guys, get in there, just like start going and freaking Frankenstein in them or Hurricane Rana in them or something, but hopefully none of them get injured, because that would suck. So we have this one guy who has this gimmick called the Dad, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably gonna work out. That sounds like something that might be like a comedic thing, or like that might sound like something that they could probably use. But I don't know. We'll have to figure out, because it seems immediately they're going to hire this guy, because it seems that was the only real gimmick that they showed there. There was a bunch of kind of just generic people in the back, which I'm sure ended up just getting reused for the FWD like background people when they needed like wrestlers in the background. They were probably like whoever was probably in this audition was also probably in the FWD stuff. So what eventually happens is that we end up having like just like some guys both auditioning, going and like locking up and kind of doing the normal run the ropes things, where like a lot of times that would be for like the rookie things to do, because like they don't want to eventually have these people like get hurt or die or get killed during this, like, ooh, this person looks good. And also it's basically just to see what this person like could possibly have in their Rolodex when eventually there to just do something more than just leapfrogs and hip tosses and stuff like that. So, uh, and I'm like, how in the do they even do like leapfrogs? Like, good God, like having like to leap over a person just seems like, oh my God, that just seems like an impossible task. To go and like hop over somebody, I would just like, dude, I'm just gonna break something just trying to leapfrog over someone. I would rather drop down than freaking leapfrog over anybody, but it seems like people do it like it's nothing. Uh, so, so we end up having the first thing we end up seeing is so like we have Wild Bill just comes in there because it seems like he's trying to possibly knock off the. Well, I don't know. I don't like we have also Wild Bill who is running the ropes and just kind of getting ready supposedly for his match, but he was really just saying that he wants to get ready to uh, eventually just go on and uh, like get ready for these state fair shows that he's going to be involved in. And Jack is like, I don't know about that. But let's get into this, and then we'll get into like when Jack was to talk to Wild Bill and Ace about like the whole matchup and whatever about their supposed triple threat. So, so eventually we have some like people running the ropes. All of a sudden, Wild Bill gets in there and is to kind of do the basics with this guy called the Dad, and Wild Bill ends up just kind of tossing this guy around because, of course, uh, this guy could probably be like deemed dangerous, or that this guy isn't loose enough, and whatever. Maybe this guy is just nervous about what he's to like be doing here because it's against like Wild Bill. So Wild Bill just kind of tosses him aside, and then all of a sudden Crystal ends up coming up, and I'm like, okay, let's see how this plays out. This is going to be interesting, and so uh, like of course they're kind of going through the basics with both Crystal and Wild Bill, and then eventually Wild Bill gets to the point of him asking Crystal like, "Hey, like pick me up and drop me," and I'm like, "What?" Crystal's gonna try and do like a like fully picking up Wild Bill and trying to like drop him, and I'm just like, what? Um, she ends up doing like on the ropes like Hurricane Rana and drops him that way. So like I'm assuming that probably Crystal is going to have to be like a high flyer, um, or quasi be kind of like a like Jeff Hardy kind of style character, just because like she'll probably be able to do like a lot of like cross bodies and stuff. Like she'll probably have to do a lot of like high power moves, or maybe she'll have to do some uh like some rope stuff, like eventually kind of like flying forearms like AJ Styles or something like that. She could probably do a lot of rope stuff, probably. Like I would say that probably just do something easy like some top rope stuff. Do some common stuff. Like a phenomenal forearm just seems like I'm not gonna have any. I wouldn't have anybody freaking do that kind of stuff. Like I wouldn't want anybody to get injured, but like that seems like some kind of real like some real like kind of like I know. Just really just basics. Do the basics. So like I could probably even see like Crystal like do a German suplex, or like some like she could probably even like do like certain kind of like specialty kind of pins or something like that. Like she could probably do some interesting maneuvers that have nothing to do with like being like having to do any kind of like I would call them like powerhouse kind of maneuvers. Uh like I could probably even see her maybe doing something like as like a suplex, like just kind of like suplexing kind of things. Like that might be an easy thing to accomplish. But so Crystal tries to lift up kind of Wild Bill and almost like the Hulk Hogan Andre the Giant kind of like maneuver there, and I'm just like, no, like please don't have her do that. Like I would just imagine like Crystal like Hulk Hogan, where like Crystal eventually would just like just mess up her back doing freaking one maneuver, because like I could see like even myself like go and just ruin my freaking back doing a maneuver like that. Um, so even a person like no matter what the size, like I could just see like not no offense to the guy who plays Wild Bill, it would just be like a hard maneuver to pull off for anybody, not just a woman of her size. So uh so eventually we see Crystal who's like jumping over freaking like ropes like it's nobody's business. And so like Willie's just like, well, I guess like we should probably hire Crystal. Like I get yeah, and like they're kind of making the consensus of like, why don't we have women wrestlers? And I'm like, yeah, like why don't we have women wrestlers? But I know they were gonna come to that eventually. I said that ever since like probably like for however long, but like I think we just really have this piece being like the early stages of wrestling, and so eventually we're gonna get any number of things. So it's like it's a slow start, but eventually we'll get to these places. Uh, like we're kind of like really putting the horse before the race kind of thing, whatever that analogy is. So and plus also we're like telling people how to do their jobs. It's like, oh yeah, Crystal could just be a high flyer. What if she doesn't want to be a high flyer? What if she doesn't want to do anything with a top rope? Maybe she just wants to just go and just do some common wrestling. Like maybe she just wants to run the ropes. That's okay too. Like freaking whatever, whatever she wants to do. Well, I wonder what her finisher will be if she ever actually goes and does something wrestling. Like I know Maven like did something as simple as like a drop kick as a finisher. So hey, like freaking anybody can do anything. So uh, so going on. So uh, eventually Willie is to go to Jack and just say like, well, it seems like we only had two wrestlers that were to really be impressive during this tryout, and one of them, of course, was the dad character. And Jack is like, okay, hire him, done. And then Willie is to say, well, the other one is Crystal, and Jack is like, yeah, no, like, because Jack is still let's just say this in a weird way. He's still butthurt about the whole Ace thing, and so like he's just like, no, like I don't want her anywhere near this promotion. So it's like, so Crystal's just gonna go off to some other promotion because she can't valet for you, she can't wrestle for you, so she's just gonna go somewhere else. Then she's just gonna go f off into FWD, because at least they'll probably let her work there. And so and then like they'll have a female world heavyweight champion, and then you'd be like, oh my god, what a missed opportunity I had there. Because like wouldn't it be cool if the big triple threat match all of a sudden turned into a fatal four-way match, Crystal's involved, and Crystal wins the match, and she's just holding up the title, and she's like, yeah, like that would be a huge ending to this first season. And like I don't know, people would have different kind of thoughts about it. A lot of people like will immediately want Ace to finally get the title, or just anybody, like sadly but Jack, and Jack is already also making that consensus also, that he also wants to have someone else get the title, which I think is interesting. Maybe yeah, so Jack is saying no, and Willie's just like, well, like we're like I guess we're just gonna have a really small talent pool for wrestlers, I guess. So, and they reference Ricky Rabies in this episode, but I don't think that they're actually going to use him. Um, like I'm interested in seeing like eventually who they're going to pick to just kind of continue to pop up through this through these seasons, like especially because I'm thinking this show is good enough for season 2. This is a really great episode, so there hopefully should be a season 2, but I don't know. Um, like I like to think that there's eventually going to be one, but I'm again like I'm speaking too soon. Like there was a lot of things about this, like especially with people getting injured and like there being the whole like Cove situation, let's just say. So this may be difficult or not in the cards to put together another season of Heels, just because that's probably why Glow wasn't going to do another season easily. Just like, no, like, so we'll see how this goes. I hope for a season 2. If it means fewer and fewer wrestling things going on in this show, then that'll be fine. Like if we just have behind the scenes going on, I'll be so excited and still so interested about this show because we'll still have like the kind of the meat and potatoes of going behind. So let's talk about this. So holy crap, I've already talked for this long and I haven't gotten to much. Uh, so Wild Bill is getting ready in the ring before he is to go and beat the crap out of a bunch of people, kind of run the ropes. So eventually uh, we have Wild Bill wanting the belt and basically saying that the only reason why the State Fair tickets are getting sold out because of him, that everything of the success of this company is happening because of him. And so Ace is just like, well, hey man, like I can't wait any longer to just like sit off to the sidelines and wait for my time to come. Like, come on, give me the belt. And so they're now like wanting to tell like both of them are kind of jockeying position for the belt. And Jack is like, yeah, I don't like, I want to give up the belt also. I've had it for too long. And so Wild Bill and Ace are just like, well, okay, who's going to have it? And Jack is like, well, I haven't wrote the matches yet. I'm like Jack is so busy. Jack is so absurdly busy that by the time that the show actually happens, he probably won't have one match written together or put together. And are they just going to have to call it in the ring? Is Jack going to have to call the match in the ring to say what's going to happen? Because it doesn't feel like he has the time to plan for any of this because there's too much going on. Like we have a part in this episode where Jack is in his car and there's to be like multiple messages. Uh, Jack again is getting the state fair people calling him and asking about like registration and all this kinds of stuff. We have Wild Bill calling Jack about a valet, and then we end up having another call like from someone else, and so Jack just gets so frustrated that he ends up like screaming uh, within his car because he's just so frustrated about everything. Stacy is to eventually go and find out uh, from the guy, I guess, who was like the car salesman. That was to be like Bill Murray's brother. Sadly, I don't have the IMDb to figure out this guy's name. That eventually Stacy is going to go off and do the national anthem uh, at this rodeo, I think, that is going to be televised. So Stacy's career is just blowing up, and so like we have Jack, who when eventually he finally does come home, Stacy is to tell him this information, and Jack is like, "Hey, how about we pop open the bubbly? Like this is good news. This is good." Like things that are happening for us, and Stacy's like, let's not waste it. And Jack's like, come on, like let's waste that. Let's go ahead and drink the heck out of that. So, uh, so hopefully getting all that out of the way. So now Ace is to uh, go onto social media and see that Rooster is having the time of his life partying with the FWL promotion at Charlie Gully's like mansion. And so like Ace is to supposedly be the White Knight and defend the honor of the DWL and to come there and want to just beat the crap out of Charlie Gully because of the stupid prank that he ended up pulling. And but like we we think that for like one fraction of a second, but then we're like, no, like all of this partying is all of a sudden going to make Ace just realize that he's like, oh my god, I'm going to live the high life here. And I get a beer in my hand every second of the day when I'm with this promotion. Oh my god, this seems too good to be true. We have Charlie Gully who's coming in here, and like a group of people are like, yeah, like they're happy to see Charlie Gully, and Charlie Gully is more of a partier than any of these other guys are, and so it just feels like reasonably Charlie Gully is going to give Ace everything that he's ever wanted, and so Ace is going to just say no to that. No, like he's immediately like I could have already like seen like okay he's gonna go on to this other promotion and just be their new guy, their new face of the company in a different place. So like I don't want to see that, but like I immediately once like I saw like one little thing and then I saw that Ace was starting to head that way. I was like, oh my god, he's immediately just gonna jump ship. And I was like, God. So Ace goes off and is to just kind of see Rooster, and so we almost have a fraction of a second where Ace is to maybe talk Rooster back into coming back to the DWL, but it's like, dude, that's not gonna happen. Like Rooster is like, hey, my ship has already sailed. Like, dude, I'm here now. Like, I'm gonna party it up. Like, maybe you should too. So Charlie Gully arrives and everybody's like, yeah, they're loving him. And so Ace is wanting to go and beat up Charlie Gully, and Charlie Gully's like, well, hey, here, like, before we do that, here's a beer, buddy. Like, you can punch me if you want, but like, let's share a beer together. So all of a sudden, both Ace and Gully are going into this one room, and so now we have the real pitch here where reasonably Gully is to mention how like Ace could really be with his company, and that also he wants to help him understand what a lot of people would probably see when they see Ace with the DWL company. And so they end up talking about hentai, which I'm like, oh, okay, I know exactly what that is because at some point like it seemed that I ended up having to uh like like when I had to go through anime stuff, and eventually I reviewed anime a lot at some point, but not as much as I used to now. Like eventually that tended to like pop up, and then I guess I was like, okay, I learned something new here. Uh, because eventually it seemed that a lot of uh, anime would describe certain things as hentai stuff. So I'm like, okay, that's weird. So, but anyways, moot point. So eventually it seems that there is to be a fan art being made of basically Jack effing Ace, and Ace is like, oh my god, why are you showing me that? Because Gully had this thing that he bookmarked to kind of show Ace this, and Gully's like, that's what everybody thinks of you, man. Like, that's really what everybody's like, dude, you're never gonna get the title because basically because Jack has just groomed you to like be fine where you're at, but really like you're the star and he's just kind of like pushing you down kind of thing. And and so like basically that's what kind of the perspective of people could just say about Ace that like he's just not ever going to get the belt, that eventually Jack is just going to hold it over him, and that's sad. So Ace is just be like, well, if one person is going to go and like do that kind of thing and kind of see me as that, maybe I should go and I should jump to this other promotion. So all of a sudden we end up having Ace going and living the high life in Gully's mansion, where eventually he ends up waking up with a woman just on top of him. He doesn't even know where he is. He doesn't even know when he is. He doesn't know why he is, but he's there. So eventually this woman is just on him, just like glued to his hip. And he's just like, whoa, just give me a second. Like, not only that is happening, but like Ace is also like mixing himself with drugs also. Like I think he's doing like crystal or something like that. And I'm just like we're just seeing that this guy is eventually just going to like probably not be a functional wrestler. I don't know. We'll see what happens after this episode. So all of a sudden, we have finally just Ace wanting to get a moment alone to himself. And so we end up calling Crystal and saying like, "Hey, like I'm at FWD, and like look at me, like, hey, like I'm gonna jump ship and I'm gonna join this promotion, and maybe I'll talk something about maybe you working here. So hey, let's come here. Let's like this seems really fun." And so Crystal's like, "What are you doing? Like, are you serious?" And so Crystal goes and steps up and does the right thing and goes and talks to Jack about what Ace had just FaceTimed her with. So Jack is now having to stop what he's doing and because he's with his family just doing a movie night. And all of a sudden, Crystal is just be like, well, Ace is off on the rocker again. Like, he's going to go and join this other promotion. So Jack is like ripping himself away from this movie night. So Stacy, like, we just really just see where there's friction happening between both Jack and Stacy, where something is going to happen here. And like, I'm assuming that Stacy is not going to be able to make it to her her national anthem singing thing, and they're probably going to have to forcibly either replace her or just do something. But Stacy's probably going to miss out on that one opportunity that she wanted to do, probably because of Jack. And I guess I'm assuming, or I'm hoping, that will probably be the last straw to where it's like, no, like to where eventually Stacy is going to have to do something. So Jack is like already frustrated, and so now he's having to run off to Florida to now have to go and figure out a way to ruin FD or FWD's promotion one way or the other. So Jack is to make it to this promotion. We have eventually Jack kind of sneaking in, putting on a hat. So all of a sudden there is to be this match where Rooster is to do this kind of like extreme, like hardcore kind of match. And so he ends up winning their kind of world heavyweight belt. And he's like holding up. He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, so they're kind of giving him, like they're getting him to be like this world champion or their world champion. I'm like, good. Like, so, like, he's not just like, so he got immediately like put into the big shot or the big kind of thing. And so we end up really finding out that like Gully was just to like have like Rooster just kind of be the bait and to try to get other people from Jack's promotion here to basically just force them to come here to just say like, well, look how great it is, and then eventually they'll just they'll just quickly get forgotten about, probably, because it's like, well, hey, like you're here now, like you signed a contract. So what ends up happening is Ace is in the back, and so after this whole promotion goes off without a hitch, Gully comes out there and is to like start to mention it's like, well, hey, like I'm sure a lot of you fans have probably heard that there's to be like another talent coming from some other town coming here, and everybody's like Ace, 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 and like, yeah, I'm sure you probably have heard that, but like maybe like that isn't exactly going to happen or something like that. Uh, so eventually Gully is to do this one thing where he mentions his card up his sleeve, and is to mention that he's going fishing and is going to reel something in, and so Brewster is to mention that that is basically Ace's cue to go out there, and all of a sudden we end up seeing instead, because I guess like Gully's promotion doesn't have like security where anybody can just run into the ring at any time, but I guess this is still an interesting moment still. Uh, so uh, so Jack runs into the ring and is to take off his hat, and so all of a sudden Gully is like, whoa, like, hey, our nemesis here, like, look at him just being here and like coming in the ring and whatever. And so all of a sudden we end up having Jack, who ends up German suplexing Gully and then punching him out. And so now Jack is to say the same thing that Tom said in the beginning of the episode, like, "Hey, don't take my stuff. Like, don't come after my stuff." He says it in more like, "Don't take my," but whatever. So like I was like, man, like this episode is so cool because we like full circle and flashback to more current time. Like we have like this real aggressive kind of interesting thing. And so we finish off the episode with a stare down between both Jack and Ace. Ace, who's kind of looking off in some part of the kind of barbed wire promotion part of the FWD, and they're just staring at one another, and it's a stare down. Just like Jack, I think, is just so livid with Ace at this point that like it's going to be interesting what we're going to see in the very final episode. Uh, maybe freaking Jack is just going to finally just like do what he did with Tom, and just they're going to have a real wrestling match just out in the middle of the forest somewhere. And like that'll be really interesting to start off an episode, but like we'll see what happens. Um, so yeah, like, and plus also we'll see if Jack ends up getting arrested for punching out Gully uh, at the end of this episode also. So the one thing that we also have to finish up with, God, there's so much to talk about. So let's finish up with Willie. So Willie is to eventually go home frustrated about what's all going on because she had to go and tell Crystal that's like, hey, I'm sorry, like you're not going to be a wrestler here. We're not going to book you. And so Crystal's getting emotional about it, and like Willie is just like before she ends up going to her car, she's like, God, like I just didn't want to do that. Like I thought it was wrong. And because like Willie goes and talks to Jack about this and mentions it's like, well, like Jack didn't confirm how Willie feels about Wild Bill being put into this promotion, and so Willie didn't think she needed to concern Jack with putting Crystal into this promotion. And but yeah, but it's just like Jack is just still kind of just insulted about what Crystal did. So Willie goes off and goes home, and so we had I think his name is Ted Day, but I could be wrong about this. Let me reset here also. Let me kind of take a moment here. Anyways, so because I want to be like fully ready to just kind of talk about this dialogue. So Willie is to eventually go home after her really long day, and all of a sudden her daughter is to eventually have forgotten about like cleaning up the kitchen because this kid evidently needed a reminder and about it, and she forgot about it. So like they have this whole argument about this whole like cereal and something being out. So all of a sudden, eventually, Willie's husband, who's Ted, I believe, ends up going out to just really just talk with Willie, but Willie just doesn't want to talk. She just wants to consistently just consume alcohol and just not talk about things. And it just gets to the point where her husband is like, no, like we're gonna talk about this because, and like I'm just worried where this relationship is gonna head between these two, like especially when like he wants to talk and she doesn't, and the more and more he tries to poke at her, the more and more she is just to get really really upset and storms off. But like so like Ted is to mention of like, well, hey, like if you don't like what you're doing, which obviously you aren't, like go and produce something else, go and do like theater, go and do something other than what you're doing. Like obviously this is like making you very upset, so do something else that'll make you happy. And so Willie is just kind of taking everything her husband is saying and just kind of throwing it back at him and just like, no, she's like scoffing off and just like, no, I don't want to do that. So, and also like we have her husband's like, well, hey, like anything that you ask me to do, I will, like I easily did. Like when Wild Bill wanted to come into the house, like Ted was okay with it. When Willie wanted Wild Bill out of the house, Ted easily just kicked him out. And so Ted really wants to ask Willie about this whole relationship uh, between Wild Bill. And like Willie's like, do not go there. Like, do not go there at all. Because, like, I think at one point Ted was to also mention, like, something about that, um, that he knew, Ted knew that Willie had a life before being with Ted, and Ted accepted it. I'm like, does that mean, that Wild Bill, that daughter of Willie's is Wild Bill's? I'm assuming that has to be it. Like, we finally should just confirm this now. Why don't we confirm this? Good God, I want this confirmed. Because Ted had already mentioned that Willie already had a life before he got, or Ted realized that Willie had a life before he got to be with her. So it's like, so that means that she already had the child beforehand. Because of course, like, this girl has like black hair and neither one of them had that hair color, but you could easily just say, well, either one of them had dyed their hair. Like a guy can dye his hair, that's perfectly fine. Um, but yeah, like we have to confirm now that this girl is to be Wild Bill's kid. We have to say that now, and I think there's evidence like to say that consistently, that they're like kind of dancing or tiptoeing over it, and that's the real like the part where Willie just storms off and is so just angry and upset about this whole dialogue that Ted is eventually building up to, and she runs off and she's like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And so is it going to be coming to the point of this couple eventually uh, just getting a divorce simply over Willie drinking, and that Ted is trying to talk to her and she just doesn't want to. She's just like, don't go there and whatever, to the point of just Ted eventually just maybe vanishing, or just like, hey, I'm going to file some papers, I'll be off. And like, what? Like, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope this relationship stays together or they work it out. But, because I want a feel good moment. I don't want a moment where like it ends in like Ted leaving, because I want to see how they work this out. Hopefully, but I don't know. So I think that I've covered everything here, but I feel also that I've let something loose here. We had a moment where also Bobby was talking to Crystal before she was to go and do her tryout, and like Bobby was like supporting her, of course, and so Apocalypse is telling Bobby, it's like, dude, tell her that you love her. Like, go ahead. Like, you might as well. Like, everybody's to kind of figure out that you do. So why don't you just say the words? Bobby's like, I don't know. So it's like, maybe we're gonna see where that goes. Maybe that doesn't go anywhere. Maybe like it's just gonna like linger till next season, or maybe we're gonna have that like cliffhanger thing of season one, or maybe Bobby will tell Crystal that he loves her, and then like that's how season one will end. Like, whoa! I'm assuming that there's going to be this big, huge bombshell of a thing ending episode 8, and then it's going to be like, oh my god, when is season 2 going to happen? Like, that's what I'm hoping how season 1's going to end. But I'm going to get out of here. I've talked for too long. There's a lot of stuff going on in these episodes. It's so good. It's so good. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Also, if I forgot anything or went in and just didn't talk good enough about this episode, I apologize. But otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.